This video is about the Pythagorean Theorem. So on the Pythagorean Theorem, if you have a right triangle, then all we need is two sides and we will be able to find the third using this formula. So if there's a right triangle with legs A and B and hypotenuse C, then a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So that formula there is the Pythagorean theorem. So when it says legs and hypotenuse on a right triangle, the hypotenuse is the side across from the right angle, and the other two sides are the legs. Now in this section, we'll also be using the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. That states if there is a triangle with side lengths A, B, and C, and a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then it's a right triangle. So the difference between the two, the first one, the Pythagorean theorem itself, you know it's a right triangle, and you use the formula to find the third side. On this one, you know you have a triangle and you know the three sides, then you use the Pythagorean theorem to check and see if those three sides work in the Pythagorean theorem formula. If they do, it's a right triangle. If they don't, it's not a right triangle. So let's do an example. Say we have this triangle, legs 3 and x, hypotenuse of 5. We know it's a right triangle from that symbol here. That little piece of a square tells us this is a right angle, making this a right triangle. So our formula said a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C must always be the hypotenuse. It must be the side across from the right angle. So we know c is 5. And then a and b, it doesn't matter as much. I could go 3 is a, or I could go x is a. Just whichever one I pick, the other leg is the other letter. So we have 3 squared plus x squared equals 5 squared. Now we have to actually square these. 3 squared means multiply 3 times itself, so 3 times 3 is 9, and 5 times 5 is 25. Now we need to solve for x, so we do opposites. This one is adding 9, so we have to minus 9. 25 minus 9 is 16. And the opposite of squaring something is to square root it. Square root of x squared is just x, and the square root of 16 is 4. So that side length is 4. We can also apply this to a word problem. So let's say a fire truck parks beside a building so that the base of the ladder is 16 feet away from the building. So we have a building, we have our fire truck, and we have a ladder on the fire truck that's going to the building, and it said the base of the ladder, that's the bottom of the ladder. That is 16 feet away from the building. The fire truck extends the ladder 30 feet. And it asks how high is the top of the ladder, so we need to find this entire distance. Most of it is on this triangle. There's a little bit that's not. So the little bit that's not, we also need information about. So that is going to be 10 feet, and that would be given to you in the problem, probably on the picture itself. So now, using this right triangle, we know this would come in at a right angle. We want to find the rest of this side, so that we could find the entire length from the ground to the top of the ladder. So we're going to use Pythagorean Theorem again. The hypotenuse is 30, so C is 30. And A and B, A is going to be x and B is going to be 16. So we plug this into a calculator. 16 squared is 256, and 30 squared is 900. We do our opposites again. Opposite of adding 256 is minusing 256. 900 minus 256 is 644. And then we square root. Again, using our calculator to square root gives 25.4. I'm going to round it the tenths. So approximately 25.4 feet. Now that's not the entire distance from the ground to the top of the ladder, because we still need that extra 10 feet, because the base of the ladder is already up in the air from being on the fire truck itself. So we're going to add these two together and get that the ladder is 35.4 feet in the air. So now let's use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. So let's say we have a triangle. We're not sure if it's a right triangle or not. We can use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem to see if this is a right triangle. So basically we're still going to use the Pythagorean theorem formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But now we don't know which one's the hypotenuse because we don't know if there's a right angle or not. So if it were a right triangle, the longest side would be the hypotenuse. So the longest side is going to be used for C. Means we use 6 and 8 for A and B. 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64, and 10 squared is 100. We add the 36 plus 64, that is 100. So since we get 100 equals to 100, this checks out. This is a right triangle. At this point we could now put the right angle on and say, I know for sure this is a right triangle. So if we had 3 side lengths, let's say we have 9, 12, and 14, and we go through this process, a squared plus b squared, again 14 is the largest number, so it would be C. 14 squared. We get 81 plus 144 equals 196. And we add 81 plus 144, 225. So this time they did not match up. This did not work. So this would not make a right triangle. So not a right triangle. So they can just give us the side lengths like this, a list of the side lengths, or they could draw it on the triangle itself. So again, we can apply this to a word problem. Say we have a 40-pound force and a 60-pound force. So they're going to be acting on an object. This point's going to be my object. 40-pound force, we're going to say, is going this way. 60-pound force is going this way. The forces together are going to create a 70-pound force, and that goes in the middle here. So this would be 70 pounds of force. So we can apply the Pythagorean theorem to this. Right now it doesn't look like we have a triangle, but if we connected down here, 40 could be considered the top or the bottom, so we can put 40 here. And now this area is our triangle. Again, we're not sure if it's a right triangle until we do the Pythagorean theorem. So hypotenuse would be the largest, 70 is the largest, 60 and 40, it doesn't matter what order we put them in, and we simplify. 60 squared is 3600, 40 squared is 1600, and 70 squared is 4900. Then we add these two together. 5200 does not equal 4900. A right triangle is not formed. So no, because they are not pulling at right angles. So when we use Pythagorean theorem, always just make sure to identify the hypotenuse, either by finding the side across from the right angle or by identifying the longest side. So that concludes our discussion about the Pythagorean theorem.